Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Hey there, it's Samantha. Now, if you're loving Now You Know, make sure you spread the word. Share this episode or your favorite one with your friends or anyone who needs a dose of women-powered wisdom. Every share helps grow our amazing community of listeners. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It makes a world of difference. Now, let's dive into this week's episode.
I grew up in a country. Women are not allowed to play football. I wanted to prove that football is not only for men. A whole country has tried to silence me, but you can still hear me, can't you?
Khalida Popal's story is one of courage and one of resilience. And her love for the beautiful game was so strong, it nearly got her killed. But not even the Taliban could take her game away. I'm Samantha Johnson, and this is Now You Know, a new show from Al Jazeera dedicated to amplifying women's voices, stories, and topics we're all thinking and talking about. This is a safe space where we go all in. So by the end of each episode, you can say, now I know. Khalida Popal is the real deal. She co-founded and captained Afghanistan's women's national football team when she was just 20 years old. And she was also the head of finance and head of women's soccer for the Afghanistan Football Federation. But in 2011, everything changed for Khalida. She was forced to leave everything she loved and everyone behind in Afghanistan because of death threats. Why? She says for bending strict gender norms by not only playing football, but for also encouraging other girls and women to play. That was before the Taliban regained control in August 2021. Since then, women have been banned from participating in all sports. Khalida, now in Denmark, felt compelled to help. So a huge thank you, Khalida, for joining us on Now You Know.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure.
Khalida, you are quite a formidable woman. I want you to take us back to when you were growing up in Afghanistan. What was that like?
When I think back about Afghanistan, it's very clear, like yesterday, growing up in a male-dominated country, in war zone, war-torn country. Still remember, because of the war, I had to miss my first grade of school. I had my backpack as every other kid that they are looking forward to show off their bags. And as school kids, unfortunately, the Civil War happened.
And where did your love of football come from?
Street football was quite famous. So I started playing with my brothers, very young age, because when you have nothing to do, the only entertainment is football, because it's accessible. It's everywhere. You don't need to have a ball to play. Just something round that's rolling, and that brings joy. During the war, all the challenges that existed in the culture, in the society, we were still enjoying life, and football was a escape for us from the challenges and the bombs and explosions. It was just the passion for the game and for the joy, but it changed when the shape of my body changed to become more visible as a girl child. And that's where the community started interfering. Like the neighbors started questioning my manners, my parents, why they're allowing me to play with the boys. And also the boys were playing with me. They faced a lot of challenges by allowing me to play with them. Unfortunately, I had to step down from playing with my team, but I didn't give up.
I think what's actually quite beautiful is the fact that you still had support. And I also find it fascinating that although you had to give that up, you still went on to create your own team. So how did all of that come about, you setting up the Afghanistan women's national team?
When the passion and the love was threatened and were taken away from me, I give up playing with the boys. And I said, there must be girls like myself. Can't be me only. I went and started campaigning and telling the girls, for example, Thursday at 5 o'clock in the morning, we have a football session, come and join me. So we went to the different schools to encourage more girls to join football. And everything was kind of undercover because it was outside the school hours. It was hidden in the backyard of the schools. And so then it started the unofficial, unrecognized a league where we started competition. And that time it wasn't my purpose, but it was the passion because football gave me and the girls in my team a freedom. We were only thinking about those moments, about present, about now, about us as the girls team. Then the pressure from the society about getting married, finding husband, learning how to cook and clean, about the violence that was happening in our next door. There was a lot of pressure for us. And football pitch was the only place to free ourselves from that pressure and feel ourselves and the pure joy for the game.
Yeah, football was your freedom. But obviously, once it got out in the open, you had a league and you had a team. What was the reaction?
We were trying our best to play silent football, which is so difficult. It's not possible. As a fan, as a footballer, as a coach, the minute the ball starts rolling, the joy and the kind of the moments, the feelings, the everything happens to your body and brain, and you kind of start screaming, you start yelling, and start being happy. Or it's very difficult to play silence football, but it did really take time, long time, until the young man on the other side of the school, they found out that there is something happening, and there is a group of girls laughing and shouting, and there is something happening. So they got curious, and the group of men jumped from the wall of school. And then they started attacking us, physically attacking us. And one of them had a knife. We were playing with the school uniform, so it was like proper dresses, and we were all covered. It wasn't any fancy football kits. According to Islam, according to culture, we were covered. But they took the ball and they destroyed the ball with the knife, and they start shouting and screaming and yelling bad words to us and saying that women cannot walk properly, how they can play football. We belong to the kitchen. We have to learn how to serve the man, and football is not for women but for men, and it's what we are trying to do is against the honor of the country, the honor of the man. And so they started really harassing and abusing physically, and that's where the moment that my passion changed to purpose, and that is like to use football and my voice to be there for my sisters who lost their voices or who have never actually owned their voices, to use football as a platform to empower and support women and stand against injustice. I stood up and I said, I'm not giving up, and I'm going to challenge this mindset, and I'm going to create a whole movement that women stand together and also show to the society, both men and women, that we are half of the population. You cannot ignore us. And that movement started with recreation of the league, where we started really pushing the Afghanistan Football Federation and the Olympic Committee at that time to help us and recognize us.
You created a league, and then you created a national team that managed to play their first international game. I believe it was against Pakistan. Tell me about that process.
Our negotiation wasn't about like, hey, it's our right. We are women. We want to prove ourselves. Nothing like that. Nothing feminist, nothing activist, because we knew that the minute we start that conversation, we'll never get the chance to get them on board. Then we said, hey, the Western world is in our country. We said, you know what? If you allow and recognize the Afghanistan women's national team, then you as a federation, you will get a lot of attention and credit. We'll do everything behind the scene. And then, of course, it took them a little bit of time. They understood that, oh, this actually brings attention and benefit also to the man of the country. So they accepted. The most powerful thing that happened was our unity, our passion and our purpose that was beyond and bigger than us. That was standing for our sisters and proving ourselves and trying to kind of change and challenge that mindset that women belong to the kitchen and at home, to showing to our people that women belong to everywhere in the society as men do. And we should be equally active in the society and have our right.
Your passion led to your purpose, but it also put your life in danger.
So for me, leading the team and playing for the national team for the first time and making history was not enough. I wanted to kind of take another step further. And that was to have the voice of women in decision making and be the first woman in Afghanistan Football Federation as the leader, as the first female employee. And I wanted to show the national team that it's possible. It's possible to work in football, to create change, but also, most important thing, to have the voice of women in decision making, because most of the time the decisions were made by men, for women, for our team, and our voices were not heard, and our challenges were not heard. So for me, my platform was my power. I started using that platform, talking less football, more about the societal barrier. And that was dangerous. That's where the men in their home, they didn't want their daughters, their wife, to listen to a young woman in the TV talking about standing for your right. And so I started receiving death threats. I started receiving phone calls, warnings, and there were people following me. And I had to change my locations, my timing that I was going to school or to work. It was so difficult. The more I was speaking up, the more I was losing the freedom. I was physically attacked several times. My brothers were beaten at school. They had to change their schools. I had to take a decision to leave the country, which I don't call it as a decision. I was forced to.
You eventually ended up in Denmark. What was it like to be a refugee or an asylum seeker?
Look, all I wanted to do is to serve my country, to serve the people, serve the women of my country. Everything was taken away from me. That kind of showed the power. Like, a man can decide and take over everything, patriarchy. I had really good connections with people who helped me to get through the country, get out of the country. And I was the luckiest one because I had the money, I had the connections, I had that opportunity to manage to escape to another country. And so due to my connections, people found out, and especially the company, sports company, that we were collaborating in Afghanistan to support the national team of Afghanistan. It's a Danish sportswear company. And the chairman reached out to me and they tried to help me, and they're the reason I'm in Denmark. But I was like, but I don't know anybody in Denmark. I don't know the country. I don't have anybody. And I lived in different refugee centers, which was horrible, like experiencing the kind of the environment in different asylum centers where people going through depression, trauma, and how the people are treated. What we hear in our country, the Western world, is like where humanity matters. But it's just the humanity and humanitarian actions only for people that look the same. The refugee camps are in old military compounds. So imagine yourself being a refugee from Afghanistan, escaping war, or from Syria or Palestine. You're put into a military compound where you see the gun, you see the kind of old military equipment. It's re-traumatizing you, and it's inhuman. Putting people who actually traumatized, who lost their families in war, putting back to the kind of this military compound. They're seeing the soldiers, they're seeing the guns, they're seeing the tanks. It's like never allowing them to actually relieve from the trauma. It's kind of like re-traumatizing. This is what's happening in the refugee centers.
But how did you get through that moment? You just said that you go through so many traumas. So what was going through your mind during that period?
In your country or the country you come from, you're someone's daughter, you have a name, you're someone. And then you become nobody. The worst thing that happens to any human being is losing the identity. You can always recover from whatever losses you have. But what happens to human beings is that all of a sudden they find themselves somewhere that they are nobody. And being in this situation where everybody is going through losing your identity, losing your network, losing your community, losing who you are, and then being amongst the people who are going through the same trauma. It's negative environment, waking up with the hope that someone has made a decision about your life, right? And that's authorities. Everybody is waiting for a letter. So there was kind of like, the people knew that if it's a kind of like a bigger envelope, that means you got permission to stay in the country. If it's smaller, you got rejection. That's where you're waking up for unknown. So I was going through depression, having like long-term anxiety and stress, PTSD. I had the suicidal thoughts. I was very sad. I was in a very, very low period of my life.
What kept you going?
There was a time that during even 1 week, we had 3 accidents. Women tried to suicide. And then I was like, my problem is nothing. What I've been through is nothing. I can still live my purpose, no matter if I'm in Afghanistan or outside Afghanistan. My purpose has never been like just serving the women in my country. I can still live my purpose and serve other people around the world where I am. They took everything from me, but what they couldn't take from me is my purpose. And your purpose stays with you until you die. And I'm going to live that purpose. And I know what I want. And that was the moment for me. That was the motivation that I stood up again and I started coaching sports, all sorts of sports, biking, running, cycling, any type of sports, football. So in Afghanistan, I call the football as a magic ball. In the refugee centers, this is a problem ball. So imagine this ball is your problem. And so try to kick as hard as you can. That brought joy and happiness again to us because we were a group of women. I was taking them for 2 hours, 3 hours outside the refugee center to do physical activities, to forget about the pain, forget about the challenge, and feel some sort of freedom from the pressure. And they really enjoyed that. They're trying to kick the ball and they had the sandal. So you could see the sandal flying while they're kicking. So they were started laughing and joking. And that moment was the most beautiful. And that's where the idea of continuing the movement, but with a different name, by the name of Girl Power, to use the power of sport and education to empowerment and inclusion of women and girls in different societies.
All of that happened in Denmark. You were keeping an eye on what was going on in Afghanistan with the women's national team as well. When we go to August 2021, that was when the Taliban came back into power.
What you are looking at right now is Taliban fighters inside the presidential palace.
You managed to save or evacuate around about 500 young girls and their families from Afghanistan. How did you pull it off? How did you do that?
The collapse of country overnight was kind of a shock to everybody, including the people in Afghanistan. Nobody was expecting this happen. The younger generation who came after me, Taliban was a story and the news, and they have never experienced living under the regime of Taliban. They've never seen Taliban. They've saw Taliban in the TV kind of like fighting against government, against the Western world. I knew that it will take time for Taliban who came from the mountain to figure out who was who. But what I was too scared about it and was very risky for our players were the man in the neighborhood who would never agree with them playing. They knew their identities, but they didn't have the power they have right now because they have the same people like Taliban supporting the same ideology. So if a neighbor comes and kill a woman and say that they have been footballers, they are against the culture, they are against religion, then they will be praised instead of being punished in the rules of Taliban. And that was the danger. And we had to really move. And sitting in myself, being as a refugee myself, I'm still a refugee, thinking, what is my power? Like, how can I save all these women that in one way or another way, I have encouraged or I have inspired them to stand for the right, to stand for what they believe. And so how can I save them? What is the way to get them out? And they are in danger. So the first call was to burn down your jersey. Don't keep anything that identified, because they started door-to-door searching. And if they come, they don't find anything. So they started digging down their trophies. They started burning down their jerseys, hiding their jerseys. The jerseys that we fought so hard. We really risked our lives to wear that badge with the pride. And we own that with so many sacrifices that all of a sudden become a danger for us. The uniform becomes something dangerous for us. And so I started connecting back with my purpose. And then I started calling people for help, calling my network for help. And nobody knew how to help, how to save the girls from Kabul, from Afghanistan. But let's figure out. And that's where I was trying my best to be a coach, to be a sister, to be a teacher, to be a psychologist, to calm down the people and say, hey, just stay focused, stay as a group. Let's focus and don't give up. They were the ones standing there fighting their life and trying to figure out how as a team they can move. So as a result, they managed to stay together as a team. And with the help of government of Australia, who came forward, we managed to get the women's national team, the whole squad, and some of their family members to Australia. So over time, the number gone from 40 to 80 to 100 to 500 to 600.
I'd like to talk about the current state of Afghanistan. Earlier this year, the Taliban said that no sports for women and girls. How do you find the courage and the stamina to keep on fighting for those women and girls in Afghanistan?
So current situation in Afghanistan, Taliban put ban on school and sport and any social activities for women and girls. Sport is seen as something against culture, and it's not something, according to Taliban, that is. So they have put ban in all sorts of sport. The football stadiums in Afghanistan, once again, are used for the public execution and public punishment. So that is the situation in Afghanistan. When I was in Afghanistan, I thought like I am just like from Afghanistan. But living as a refugee, I learned to be a world citizen. I don't feel like I belong to one country. I serve and I use my individual power, because we as an individual, we all have the power to stand for justice, to stand for human rights. This is a responsibility as a human, as a woman, to take that responsibility and really create that sisterhood support where our rights are not taken away from us just because of our gender.
Khalida, I said at the beginning of this interview that you are a formidable woman, and I stand by that. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you giving your time and just for coming through your story all over again, because it can't be easy. It really can't. So thank you again for speaking to us.
Thank you so much.
So now you know how sports can help in the fight for women's rights. Thank you to Khalida Popal for talking to us. And of course, a special thanks to you for listening to and watching Now You Know.